Welcome everyone to part 3 of the 20 Minutes with Marco interviews. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day today to join us. And if you would like to access the closed captioning, you can actually turn the feature on along the bottom menu bar. So my name is Caitlin Woods, and I am a project agent for the Restige CBDC's Hire for Talent project. And I am joining you today from Campbellton, New Brunswick, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Micmac First Nations, on which we learn, work, and play. We have Marco Pasqua, who has joined me today to talk about one of his favorite topics, inclusive interviews. Marco, as some of you may know, is an award-winning entrepreneur, accessibility consultant, and an inspirational speaker. Marco has an extensive amount of experience working with business leaders who are well known for more accessible, inclusive workplaces. Marco, thank you so much for joining me today. It is always such a pleasure when we have the chance to connect. So let's get started. My first question for you is, why should employers consider making their interviews inclusive?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. So first and foremost, hi, everybody. And it looks like Megan in the chat there is just saying that the CC, the closed captioning option, doesn't appear to be available. We can address that there for a second. Want to make sure that we're being inclusive during the portion of this. But yeah, why employers should consider inclusive interviews is quite simple. We're, much like I said in the recruitment video in this series, we're in a time where employee retention is at an all-time most importance. And I think that by creating an environment that is inclusive, you're not just focusing on segmenting your interview process just for individuals with disabilities, but rather all individuals who are going through the interview process, whether those individuals identify with having a disability or not. You probably know this as well as I do, Caitlin, is that sometimes people don't disclose whether or not they have a disability, right? And so it's almost impossible for us to know, like, okay, well, this is our standard interview process, and this is our inclusive interview process. No, you need to change your way of thinking. The entire process should be considered inclusive from top to bottom. And by doing that, you're going to attract a staff and individuals to your organization that have the diversity that you're looking for. We live in a very unique time, throughout this pandemic, where we're learning new methodologies, new ways to attract staff, to attract people to our organization. And it's putting employers to task a little bit in terms of what are the type of workplace cultures that we want to build out. And there's a real opportunity here to attract staff throughout your recruitment process, throughout your interview process, that you wouldn't have had access to before. Obviously people with disabilities is a group of those individuals, but just in general, being able to have people who wouldn't normally be able to commute to your offices, be able to offer their skills and abilities within your organization, and setting the tone by creating your interview process to be inclusive really lets them know that everybody is welcome and included within your organization.
Yes, 100%. My second question for you is, what should employers and HR representatives take into consideration when offering an inclusive interview?
Okay, so this is the big one here. And I wrote some documentation for hirefortalent.ca around this. I like to call this the golden opportunity. I mentioned it a little bit in our recruitment series video as well, but the golden opportunity is that introductory email once you know that a candidate has been selected to come in for an interview, whether in person or virtual. And that's the email where you send it out to let them know of any of the logistics that they need to expect when they come in to do the interview. So how long is the interview going to last? Is there an expectation for the types of clothes that you expect them to wear? Setting that tone in terms of, is this super formal? Is this something where they can be a little bit more casual? Is going to depend on the type of industry that you work in, obviously, that kind of thing. But now we need to get into the nitty-gritty of things. Are you willing in your organization to include some of the questions that are going to be asked as part of the interview to give that person preparation time? And so for those of you who aren't thinking outside of the box or asking, why would I include these questions in advance? It's quite simple. You may have somebody who has autism, ADHD, a learning disability, or just anxiety in general about being interviewed, and having the peace of mind of knowing the exact questions that are going to be asked of them really gives them a sense of, okay, I can plan ahead. I can understand what's going to be expected of me. I can do my homework as the potential employee of knowing exactly what this organization is about, what their workplace culture is about, how I feel I fit and I'm included in this. Workplace location is very, very important. So in that email, being able to provide directions via Google Maps, or are there close transit sites? You don't know if the individual is a person who uses a wheelchair like myself, or just likes the directions in general. What is the closest transit stop? Include that in there. And if you have parking, what is the kind of parking situation? Is there accessible parking available at your location if you're doing an in-person interview? How close is it to the front door? What's the walking situation going to be like? Is the person expected to walk up a massive flight of stairs? And for you, the employer, can you create an environment where that interview is taking place, where it is calm, relaxing, and it is in an environment that isn't super noisy? Because I know that if you have ADHD or you're already nervous and there are a lot of distractions or things around you, you won't necessarily bring your full stuff to that interview. You're always going to be distracted about a ticking clock or people hustling and bustling next to you. So that golden opportunity of that intro email to include all of that information. Hey, by the way, our organization, we value and respect your individuality. So feel free to come in what you're comfortable in. Just remember that, it reflects on obviously who you are as a person, but at our organization, we want to meet the real you. So in providing that information and those logistical details, I think would be massively, massively important. And it gives peace of mind. It lets people know you don't have anything to hide as an employer. What you're wanting to do is for that person to feel like they can be comfortable in their own skin, to be who they are. And then, of course, the last piece, because we are doing a lot of remote or virtual interviews these days, this is going to sound like a no-brainer, but it's an easy fix. If you're doing it through Zoom like we are today or through Teams, do you have closed captioning available? Do you have transcription available so that people can follow along? If they didn't understand the question you asked, the ability of being able to reread that question as it appears on the bottom of the screen so that they can have clarity is great. And I would say the last piece in addition to that is, what type of interview is this? Right? Is this a one-on-one interview? Is this a multiple people interview? The last thing you want to do is have someone feel as though they're sideswiped. They think they're going to have a one-on-one interview. And next thing you know, they come into an office. It's the first time they've been back in an office in person in 2 years. And now there's 4 people sitting at a desk and they feel as though they're about to be grilled or something like this. So providing those key details in that intro email, as I call it, the golden opportunity, that's exactly what it is. You're making your life easier because you're setting the tone. And for the potential interviewee, you're giving them the baseline to understand that you're saying so much more than just congratulations, you're getting an interview and this is the time it's taking place. But now here are the things that you can expect pre-interview and post-interview. And if those of you who did attend my recruitment session, you'll remember that I also said offering things like accommodations in advance. So providing an email at the bottom of that intro email saying, hey, if you do require any kind of accommodations that hasn't been made aware, again, this is not about necessarily disclosing disability, but providing an email where they can email you confidentially and say, actually, yes, can I be provided the questions in advance? Can you move this to an environment that's a little bit more quiet? Actually, I do have a wheelchair. So can we ensure that the interview room is at an area that I could access with my assistive devices, things like this, or them letting you know, for example, that they use a service animal or service dog, right? And just giving you a heads up that if there are people with fur allergies or things like that in the office, just to be aware that they're going to be bringing additional supports with them.
And I love that you say all this, Marco, because yes, of course, people with disabilities will benefit from all the above that you just mentioned, but just people in general will benefit from all of that. Knowing what they're walking into in an interview, knowing, transit ways, what they might need to wear, et cetera, like all those things could be benefited from any individual, not just people with disabilities.
That's right, Caitlin. And I'm sure you remember, it's probably been a long time since you've interviewed for a job, but that is a nerve-wracking feeling in general. You're starting a new job. You want to be on, you want to present yourself to the best of your ability. The last thing you need is a bunch of unknown variables where you don't know if those accommodations that you require are going to be met. And now that people are working from home or potentially doing the interview from their home office or even off of their phone, it's important for the potential candidates to remember too, what is the angle of your camera? Are you comfortable with the way in which your camera is positioned? Are you actually bothering to make eye contact with the camera? We've had to navigate this pandemic in such an interesting way because you're not really thinking about your environment in the same way as if you were in a physical room. So if you want to make a strong impression, if you want to make a connection with the interviewer, it's so important to remember that iris of your web camera or your phone or whatever the case may be is also the direct eye contact with the your potential employer. So if you want to set your best foot forward as both the employer or the potential employee, make sure that you are making eye contact with the individual, that you are making a connection as best you can, particularly when it is in a virtual environment.
And I wanted to bring up the closed captioning. I find it interesting because I could benefit from closed captioning. I don't have a hearing problem. I don't have any kind of hearing impairment. But even when I watch a movie and there's closed captioning on the screen, sometimes I'll sit there and I'll read it to really understand what the person is saying, because sometimes you just don't understand what they're saying or you miss a word. So it's nice to have that as well.
And let's dive a little bit deeper about those closed captions and the transcription. If you can transcribe that first interview, imagine the benefit if there's a secondary interview process and that person's able to download the transcription of the first questions that were asked of them. And prior to that second interview, maybe it's now an in-person interview in the second interview, or they're going to be meeting with a higher level management person in your organization. They can review that transcription as though it's a novel of some sort and really get to the details of what did I actually say in that moment? Did I stumble over these words? What do I want to reflect on to do better in the next interview? And same thing for the employer. What is it that you missed in those questions to that potential employee that you really want to hone in on and focus on that next interview piece? Are there things that you didn't get to mention about your workplace, about your accommodations, about your inclusion that now you want to bring up in the next opportunity that you have with this person, especially if you think there's somebody that can really grow within your organization? Maybe they had a little bit of a rocky start in that first interview, but you think that there are ways in which you can hone in and kind of discover who they truly are once you kind of remove the veil a little bit and make them feel the most comfortable.
Definitely. And I think it's just great to be inclusive, because overall, like I mentioned before, it benefits everybody.
Yes.
For an employer to just become inclusive, it's little things that they can tweak that's just going to make it overall a better experience for all employees, not just the ones with disabilities.
Yeah, this doesn't have to cost a ton of money. People are so afraid about creating accessibility or inclusion strategies within their organization because, senior leadership teams will go, well, how much is this truly going to cost me? Well, to be honest with you, these small tweaks, they don't cost a lot of money, if any money at all. And they just require you shifting or pivoting the way in which you normally do things in order to open yourself up to a new grouping of potential employees that you didn't have access to before.
For sure. So I guess after this, like, what would be the top 3 things that you think employers and HR representatives should implement immediately when hosting interviews?
Okay, well, this is going to sound like I'm reiterating myself, but number 1 is start right now crafting that intro email. Start crafting how it reflects your workplace culture. Don't be afraid to have a little bit of fun with it. If you're a fun organization and it's not just stringent of you, kind of being, a little uptight, or maybe you have to be a little bit more professional because you work with government, that's totally fine. But remember that you are all still human beings at the end of the day. So work in what you can to reflect your personality a little bit of your organization and really become clear on those things that you think, if the roles were reversed and you would receive that email, what are the key things that you would want to include in that intro email? The next thing, of course, is ensuring that your interview location is flexible. So you may prefer to do things online, but in person, but if you are able to do things online, then that's great. As well as the time that's available. Depending on your organization, start times and end times as to when somebody gets the job is one thing, but when you do the interview, do you have flexibility? If you wanted it in the morning, but the person says that due to personal reasons or their home life or whatever the case may be in these times, are you able to be flexible with the location and the time at which it's being conducted? And if you are conducting, this is the final point, if you are conducting those virtual interviews, make sure that you have the transcriptions and captions option available, or that you at least indicate that in that intro email that this option will be available if they request it, right? So, but I would say by default, you should always have that available because it doesn't cost a lot of extra time or energy, and it really makes sure that both of you have peace of mind in that regard. So I think that those would be my top three things.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marco. I guess we still have some time left. Do you have any other tips that you would recommend employers to do when hiring inclusively?
Absolutely. Again, keep it fun, but most importantly, keep it authentic. Don't feel as though because I just mentioned a bunch of things about being playful and things like that, that all of a sudden you have to become that. If that's not who you are and that's not who your organization is, that's fine. But who is your organization? Really take a deep dive and reflect and understand what is the culture that makes up the group that you work with? What would your CEO or your senior leadership team say about what they would want to have most reflected in your social media and things like this? So remember that you're always going to be an extension of what your organization is offering to potential employees. And that's in every methodology, from the interview process to the recruitment process to your social media. Try to have a consistent voice in all of those platforms so that there is that consistency there and that people don't feel as though potentially you have something to hide or that you lured them in with one type of personality. And then when they start the job, it's a completely different workplace environment. Really try to keep that consistent because that's how you're going to affect retention. And I believe that we are going to be having a session on retention. I'm not sure if it's the next session, but retention is a huge thing right now, as I mentioned off of the top. And if you want to retain employees of any kind of value or any kind of sort of important reflection of your organization moving forward, then I think remaining authentic throughout the process is how you're going to do that.
Perfect. I guess maybe we have a few minutes left, but maybe we can jump right into the question and answer period.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody has any questions. If you're unable to turn your microphone on, maybe just type them in the chat and then I can unmute you to know that you have a question. So feel free.
And I do also want to mention, it looks like Valerie mentioned in the chat here that even concussion sufferers would benefit from a lot of this as well. Yeah, I fortunately have not had a concussion, but I have had a lot of friends as I play wheelchair sports suffer from concussions. And once you get one concussion, it's very easy to get multiple concussions. And things like chronic fatigue or headaches, chronic headaches happen a lot. So remembering things like the lighting of the environment that you're in, if they're coming in person and you have a fluorescent lighting environment, or maybe you can change the lighting a little bit by having, I want to say mood lighting, but other lighting like desk lighting or things like that, just soften the environment a bit, would really, really change and impact how comfortable that person feels, whether they've had concussions or otherwise. Yes, thanks, Shep. I really appreciate that. My colleague there, Shep, is just saying that lighting is truly important and does need to be considered. Yeah, I mean, we all, if we're in person and we're working in these environments, those fluorescent lights, we often wonder why we feel fatigued at the end of the day. Well, being in that environment where the light is flickering at such a fast pace that you don't even pick up on what's taking place, it can be exhausting. And so remembering to meet people where they're at is super, super important. And Shep is just saying here, it's cheap and easy to add a bit of dimmers. I love dimmering workplace environments. It makes me feel calmer. It puts me in a better place. It makes me feel as though I'm not as anxious as I maybe once was going into this new situation where I have to kind of put myself on display for an employer. So that's really, really important.
And that would help with a lot more things too, like just knowing me going into an interview. I mean, it's been a while since I've been in an interview, but it's nerve-wracking, it's stressful. So just having a more calming, relaxing setting could help somebody deal with their anxiety as well.
Yes, exactly. Valerie saying overall, the concept of comfort permitting candidates to do their best is extremely valuable. Employers have to put so much into finding the candidates, so why not set them up for success? Yes, and actually, on that note, it's not cheating if you're giving the questions in advance to the interview. I don't know why, but employers have asked me, isn't it cheating to let them know what I'm going to ask them in advance? And I said, well, cheating who? Cheating yourself? Because like, do you think that they're going to come up with the craziest, most incredible answer ever just because you gave them the question in advance? And also, if they do, is that a bad thing? Like, do you think that they're only going to be on their best behavior or their best answers because of that interview process? And then the second that you hire them, they're going to be a completely different person? No, if you set the tone to where you're accepting them for all of who they are, then they're going to bring that self to work every single day. And that is so, so important. We need to reinvent the system of we do things this way. We start work at 9, we end work at 5 p.m. It's not like that anymore. And if there's any silver lining to the pandemic, it's that we've been able to change the way in which we do things. One final thought also, and I mentioned this to you before people attended here today, Caitlin, is I recently went into an in-person conversation with a developer that I'm working with as an accessibility consultant in a workplace setting. And I have a 1-year-old daughter who's turning 1 in like 9 days. And I brought her with me to this very corporate setting. And I don't think I would have been able to do that pre-pandemic. I don't think people would have understood, but because she's so young and because my wife and I, we work a lot together in these projects, we brought her with us into the office. And not only did they know she was coming, they were excited to see her. People were really excited to see the next young generation being a part of this. And so remember, understanding that people are people at the end of the day. And when they hang up their hat from whatever role that they have with you, they're still just human beings that have a life outside of work. And there is a real importance there of making sure that they bring their full self when they are working for you and that you respect that, because then there isn't going to be this thing where they feel as though their employer doesn't really want them to truly be them, but rather be this shell that they should fit inside of.
Perfect. Well, I guess we'll start wrapping it up. If anyone thinks of any further questions, please feel free to send them to info@hirefortalent.ca, and we can try to gladly get back to you as soon as possible. Marco, thank you for sharing and having these great conversations as usual. We want to thank you for your time, and I know I have taken away some great information, and I'm sure those who attended would agree. So a huge thank you as well to our attendees who joined us today. And please join us for part 4 of the 20 Minutes with Marco conversations on April 12th at 3 p.m. And we will be discussing successful onboarding. So in the meantime, you can check out all of our resources that we have available at hirefortalent.ca. And thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you all again on April 12th.
Oh, no, thank you so much, everyone. And Caitlin, is there a link to the Eventbrite for the next event that maybe we can post
I will share it in the chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I really hope that you valued this 5-part series that we're doing. Really looking forward to the onboarding piece. And if there's things that you want adjusted in this format that we're doing, also feel free to email info@hirefortalent.ca as well. Is there a different way in which we can approach the information? Or if there's things in advance of these sessions that you want us to address as part of a question without being put on the spot and asking questions at the end, we can incorporate those things in advance of that next session. So if you have things you want to have covered for onboarding, email the team at Hire for Talent, let them know, and I'll make sure that we cover those things on that next session.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.